Hey everybody. Hey, so my name's Tyler, Tyler Schmidt, and I have a host of experiences in cyber domain, both in the private and military sector. I currently work at a tech company, and yeah, so today we're going to be talking about online safety. I'm really excited. And for those of you who don't know, so sorry, the CompTIA is just a cybersecurity certification. Same with Security Plus. A Plus is more like kind of a technical certification around hardware and stuff. But it's just a fancy ways of just saying I have experience. So, all right. Now, today, these are the main objectives that that I'm hoping to complete all of them. But most importantly, I want you to have learned something and feel empowered to continue to advocate for your children after leaving this class. So, or this training. Um, and we'll kind of move forward from there. So, and just to give you guys a little bit of a sense, so this is my family, my wife and our 7 kids. And I just want to say, raising teenagers today is very hard. There's a lot to balance, setting boundaries, picking the right battles, managing busy schedules, and figuring out when to step in and when to let them kind of learn on their own. So, but one area I don't think we can afford to just let them figure out by themselves is their digital life. So, the online world is very powerful, can shape habits, behavior, and identity in ways that happen quickly and sometimes even quietly. And if we're not helping guide them, coach them, and stay involved, they're left to navigate that world on their own. And that can lead to unhealthy habits or situations they're not ready to handle. So my goal tonight isn't to scare you or, be an alarmist. Like it's just to equip you, to give you practical ways to help your kids navigate this space with confidence and good judgment. So without further ado, let's get started. Okay. Now, before we get into specific tools and strategies, I want to take a step back and frame what we're actually dealing with. The internet is kind of woven into almost every part of our lives: friendships, school, identity, even money. You name it. But what's easy to forget is this is all very new. So, um, if you look at human history, we've only been living like this for only like a few decades, and we're still figuring out kind of what the rules are. And that's what I mean by so like that's what I mean by the ethics taking time to catch up in this slide. So our technology is moving incredibly fast, but our habits, boundaries, and even our understanding of what's healthy, that takes time to develop. And in that gap of time, that's where problems tend to happen. So, example I'd like to bring up, Red Cross used to give out comfort kits to soldiers and POWs who fought in World War II. What did these comfort kits contain? Cigarettes. Yes, the Red Cross gave out cigarettes to people. And this was at a time, of course, before we knew what smoking, lung cancer, all the consequences, right? So if you think about that in today's day and age, we're kind of just dealing with a different, in a different pendulum or a different section instead of cigarettes and health. Now we're focusing on mental health and etc. So and because these platforms are powerful, they're designed to capture attention, influence behavior, and keep people engaged. So just so you know, safety isn't just about blocking bad things. It really comes down to having the right principles and habits in place. Without those guardrails, people, especially teens, are more vulnerable to things like manipulation, unhealthy habits, or getting pulled into situations they're not ready for. So, as we go through this tonight, I want you to keep this idea in mind. We're not just managing technology and apps, etc. We're helping our kids learn how to navigate something that humanity itself is still learning how to handle. We've had generations to learn how to drive safely, but only a few years to learn how to, navigate and live safely online. So, um, 1 second. Oh, and one thing that I really wanted to get into, but I definitely won't have time, is generative AI. It's definitely on top of online safety and social media. It's definitely the new thing. There's plenty of tools: Copilot, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, tons of them, right? And this is something that's also influencing social media and teenagers today. So I just encourage you to go ahead and look all of that up on your own after this class, but something to definitely keep in the back of your mind. Now, what is social media? If you've never heard of social media, it's basically where people share content online, right? So there's various different platforms. Instagram's really focused on pictures, same thing with Snapchat, and they all have their different features and things that they kind of claim to fame, right? But they all kind of have a similar mission, which is just sharing content and having friendship and community at scale with each other. So, what is social media and safety? Now, so like I said, it's connection at scale. Um, you may have seen in the news recently that companies like Meta and Google have faced lawsuits and legal challenges around how their platforms impacted kids, particularly around things like mental health and addictive design. I'm not going to go into too deep into the legal side of that, but I bring up for one reason. Even the companies building these platforms are being challenged on how powerful they are. And that's important for us as parents to understand because social media isn't just communication, it's connection at scale on a larger stage. Our kids' friendships, their identity, even their reputation, a lot of that is now playing out in a very public or even semi-private spaces. And at the same time, these platforms are designed to capture their attention. The more you engage, the more you see, and over time, that can shape mood, focus, and even behavior. So again, safety isn't just about blocking bad content. It comes down to helping our kids develop boundaries and judgment. Things like privacy settings, healthy routines, and how they treat others online, those are what actually reduce risk and drama. So the question isn't, should our kids be on social media? Questions more so, how do we help them navigate it well and how do we balance things? So now, I know this is a lot in this slide, okay? So take a moment to kind of take it in. But the main idea is, and this will be in the supplemental handout. This will be included on it. So just so you don't feel like you need to copy this down. But the main idea is that, same internet, different spaces, and each of these spaces comes with different risks. So instead of focusing on which app your child is using, it's more helpful to think about what kind of space are they in. So, for example, public spaces like feeds are really about reputation. What gets posted can be seen by a lot of people. Group chats, more about, social dynamics. And this is where a lot of drama and gossip and bullying can happen. Private messages can feel safe, but that's also a place where manipulation or pressure can happen more quietly. And then you have anonymous or alt spaces where there's less accountability and behavior can change pretty quickly. And finally, gaming and voice chat, those combine social interaction with strangers in real time, which is also a place where bullying can happen during the voice chat, because sometimes that banter back and forth can really get out of control. So the takeaway here isn't, it's not just about the app, it's about the environment your child is in and how they're using it. So, all right, we'll go on. Okay, online influences and mood, focus, and behavior. So now let's talk about what this actually looks like in real life. One of the biggest things to understand is that online experiences don't just stay online. They affect how our kids feel, how they focus, and how they behave. So first, let's do mood. Social media creates a lot of comparison, drama, instant feedback. Something as simple as, no one liked my post can feel much bigger to a teen than it might to an adult or, someone older. And because it's public and immediate, that those feelings can hit a lot harder. Next, we got focus. Well, I gotta move this out of the way for really quick. Okay, we got focus, constant notifications, and switching between apps trains the brain to expect interruption. So you get into that habit of like, oh, ding, ding, real easy to just, and it's always harder to get back into what you were focusing in on, even as an adult. So for teens, that's even harder since their brains are still developing. But so when it's time to do homework or focus, it's harder and leads to frustration, can lead to mistakes and sometimes even conflict between parents or friends. Then we have uh, behavior. So online spaces tend to reward quick reactions, post now, respond now, keep scrolling. So situations that might calm down in person can actually escalate online, especially in group chats late at night. But the key takeaway here, this isn't just about screen time. It's about how these environments shape habits and responses over time. And the good news is boundaries and routines can make a big difference. So, um, all right, so let's kind of go through this mood focus loop, right? So this is kind of how this just keeps happening and happening. And for adults who kind of get to know themselves, even some adults I think can struggle to recognize this. But for teens, it's going to be especially harder, right? So teen stressed, bored, checks phone, quick boost, feed delivers drama or comparison, or it sucks them in. Um, mood drops, less focus, more impulsive reactions. Uh, and we tend, when focus drops, we tend to be more impulsive, quicker to react, quicker to snap, less patient. And that can lead to missed work, frustration, conflict at home, like I was saying earlier. Um, Here, let's just get all of this out there. There we go. So, oh, sorry about that. They go back to the phone to escape how they're feeling. And the cycle just keeps repeating, right? So they have the conflict, and especially if like procrastination builds up, right? Anxiety builds. And then what do they want to do? Oh, let me escape. How do I escape? Oh, I have the phone right here. Let me go check to see if somebody said something. Oh, I finish a problem. Oh, let me go back to the phone, right? So it's just this thing that can just be continuous, right? So it's just something to make sure you're looking out for, because it's a habit, and this is you're building the foundations as a teenager for the habits that you have in early adulthood, and they just keep continuing to solidify. So, all right, we'll keep getting into that. So, why do teens need support online? So this brings us to an important question: why do teens need more support in this space than adults? Well, first thing, they're still learning self-control and judgment, like I was saying, which isn't a flaw. It's just part of development. Challenge is that online world often expects them to have skills they're still building. Things like impulse control, emotional regulation, uh, and thinking through consequences. So let's kind of go into, let me get all of that there. Okay. So at the same time, the pressure they experience online can move faster than their ability to cope with it. Social pressure, comparison, drama, it all happens quickly and often publicly. And that can be a lot for a developing brain to handle. So another important piece is that habits form quickly in this environment. Small things like constantly checking the phone, reacting quickly, or staying up late, scrolling can turn into patterns before we even realize it. And this last one is really important. Teens may feel like they're in control, but at the same time, they can be feeling overwhelmed underneath and not even know it, or do know it and just don't want to say anything, right? They just don't want to admit it. And sometimes they don't even have like the language or awareness to recognize that or express it properly without feeling shameful or guilty, right? So this isn't about saying teens can't handle technology. It's about recognizing that they're still learning how to navigate it. And that's where we come in as parents, not to control or anything like that, but to guide, coach, support them as they build those skills. So, takeaway here, they don't need less independence. They just need more support while they build it. All right, warning signs. So now let's talk about what this can actually look like at home. And the first thing I want to say here is if you're seeing some of these things, it doesn't mean something is wrong with your child. It just means something may need attention, right? Um, so, okay, hold on, let me get all of them up here. There we go. Okay. So the key is here not to focus on one bad day. We're looking for patterns over time. You might start to notice changes in a few different areas in mood and behavior, things like irritability, anxiety, or big mood swings, especially after being on the phone. In sleep and energy, staying up late, struggling to fall asleep, or waking up to check their phone. Um, in social behavior, it could be like pulling away from friends or activities or getting caught up in drama that feels all consuming and that's all they're thinking about or talking about. And then there's some device related signs, being very secretive, quickly hiding screens, or having a strong reaction when the phone is taken away. Um, those can be signs as well. So, and again, but be thinking about this over time, right? Like sometimes they're just having a bad day, right? But and I want to say something really important. So if your child is already showing some of these patterns, it's okay to step in and say something needs to change, even if they're not happy about it. I mean, um, just going slow and staying calm, I think, is one of the most important parts of doing that. Now, cyberbullying, we kind of brought this up a little bit earlier, but just to throw it up here so that everybody's aware. And just so mean messages, rumors spread online, sharing private photos without consent. That is called doxing. Okay. And this can happen anytime, and it can be very permanent, and it can feel really embarrassing and create a lot of big emotions in someone who's still developing their own capacity for emotions. Now, what do you want to do first? So when something does happen, uh, at, and at some point it probably will, these are the moments that really matter, because this is where you get to show your child how to handle conflict and difficult situations. And if there's one thing parenting has taught me, kids tend to follow our example more than what we actually say, right? So, so I like to think of this in four simple steps. Stabilize, right? Okay, so we want to stay calm, even if you're frustrated or concerned. Make sure your child is safe. Let them know something like, hey, I'm really glad you told me. You just want to make sure that you're keeping the door open for conversation, but also making sure that they're safe, right? Um, and then the next thing you want to do is preserve. So you want to stay calm, but take screenshots, save usernames, dates, links, and try not to delete anything right away. Just information can be really important if you need to report it later. So just make sure that you're keeping that in mind. Then you want to assess. So take a step back, understand what's actually going on, who's involved, what happened, is there a real threat? And as you're doing this, go back to preserving, right? You want to make sure that you're documenting all this in some capacity. Even if that's just, recording your own voice on your phone, writing something down in a notebook or whatever. But, is this, as you're assessing, you want to see if this conflict is between kids, if it's something more serious with an adult, is it harassment, coercion? Is there, what kind of safety issue is here? And are there other parents involved? Now, next one, you want to act. Uh, Now, this might mean reporting or blocking, which usually all platforms have some kind of reporting tool of abuse that you can report through their platform. Um, if it involves a school peer, you may need to involve the school. And if there are threats, extortion, or anything serious, that's when you escalate and get additional help. Um, but the bottom line, stay calm, document what's happening, think, think before reacting, and follow through. The biggest thing is following through, right? You don't want to let your kid or your teen have to deal with this on their own. And even if you don't know the right answer, you don't have to act like you do. It's just about trying to figure it out with them, right? Um, but having a clear approach such as this can make a big difference, especially if you start, if there's something that's already coming to mind, you can use this as a framework to kind of go back to whatever particular situation you're dealing with. So act. Action changes things. All right. What not to do. So we just talked about what to do. Now let's talk about what not to do. And I'll be honest, this can be hard. right? Like even as adults, like we have our own feelings, we have our own emotions, and we have our own baggage, right? And sometimes the teens that we gave birth to or were step parenting can really just they just know how to press those buttons, right? So sometimes it's really hard, but just it's really hard, but at the same time, do your best to try and take a deep breath and stay calm, right? So, all right. Um, the reason this matters though, so in terms of like don't leading with or here, let me set the frame here. So the reason this matters, how we respond, right? In these moments can either keep communication open or shut it down, right? Because it's better to have to be able to go back and change what you were, if you felt like you made a mistake, but keeping the door open rather than reacting with big, heavy-handed things that are going to shame or punishment, and then it's going to close the door and they're not going to want to come to you for these things, which is only going to fuel that secretive behavior that they're trying to do. So, the goal here, let's go to the next one, right? The goal is to respond in a way that is calm, curious, and collaborative, not reactive. Something as simple as, hey, let's make a plan can completely change how your child experiences that moment. Now, there are a few reactions that tend to make things worse or stop teens from coming to us. So, emotional reactions, right? Like I was saying earlier, leading with punishment or shame. Things like, give me your phone, what were you thinking? Those reactions can shut things down pretty quickly. Escalation, responding in anger, especially toward other kids or parents, can escalate the situation and make it harder to resolve. And mistakes in handling the situation, such as like deleting messages right away, we want to make sure that we're actually, preserving everything or at least as best as we can, right? And more serious situations like scams or extortion, negotiating usually makes things worse, just so you know. So that's where we want to pause, preserve, and report to the platform. Or, if you need to get local law enforcement involved, by all means, there's always a non-emergency number that you could dial, right? Um, so because the goal isn't just to solve this problem, it's to make sure that they come home to you for the next one. That's the biggest takeaway here. Now we're going to kind of shift here, right? And I really love my logo, by the way. I don't know, I just was really super excited about it. But digital hygiene, okay, washing your hands with ones and zeros. So everything we've talked about so far has been, reacting to situations. This next part is about preventing a lot of those situations from happening in the first place. And that's where this idea of digital hygiene comes in. Now, there is going to be a little bit of extra stuff here, but so, digital hygiene is really just a set of everyday habits, help keep your accounts, your devices, and your personal information safe online. Just like we teach our kids to brush their teeth or lock the front door, these are habits that protect them over time, and can build off and create even better habits. So, first, you want to protect your accounts. Things like strong passwords, not reusing them, using multi-factor authentication. These are simple steps, but they go a long way in preventing most account takeovers or hacks. Um, Second, we want to avoid common threats. This is where awareness matters. Not clicking suspicious links, being cautious with messages, even if they look like they're from someone you know, and you want to make sure verifying before you trust something online. And then third, we got control your digital footprint, helping kids understand what they share, who can see it, and how long it can last. Because once something is out there, it's often hard to take back. The only, saving grace we have is that there's just so much information out there sometimes that it's just, impossible for someone to completely sift through all of it. But um, so the important thing here is most issues don't come from sophisticated hacking. They come from small mistakes, repeated habits, or not knowing what to look for. And the good news is habits can be taught. So again, this isn't about perfection. It's about building simple habits that protect your child over time. So passwords, not my favorite, one of my favorites. Um, so passwords. I encourage you to use bare minimum 12 characters. Don't panic if you're not doing that just now, just take note of it, right? So uh, starting with passwords, right? And I want to simplify this because this could sound a little more complicated than it actually is. Most account breaches don't happen because someone is hacking in a sophisticated way, like I was saying earlier, right? It's normally just the smaller things. So they can happen because weak passwords, reused passwords, or someone being tricked into giving your password or access in a different way. So if we get a few basics right here, we eliminate a large percentage of those risks. Let's see here. So first we want to, oh, I didn't realize my wheel did that. Cool. Good to know. So first, as I was saying, use strong passwords. But next, MFA, right? So multi-factor authentication, also known as two-factor authentication, which is something you are, something you know, or something you have, right? Something you know, your password, something you are, your fingerprint, your voice, your eye, and then something you have, your phone or some other kind of token or USB key or something. Anyway, uh, and then let's see what else we got. Okay, so no reuse. Please do not reuse passwords. And if you are, it's okay. Just go and change them eventually over time. Uh, you know, it's just very easy for, once one thing gets taken over, then it's a domino effect, right? And one thing that can really help you with this is a password manager. And there are so many of those out there available to you, no matter who you are or what kind of platform you like. You got it on Apple Passwords. Personally, I use 1Password. I just switched though, from LogMe once, but seriously, it's just about making sure that you're using very unique passwords and then when you use a password manager, you only have to remember one. So, all right, device level basics. Now let's talk about something very simple but very important, the device itself. Because sometimes we think about online safety as something happening out there, right? When in reality, a lot of risk starts with what's happening right here on the device that you have in your hand. And just to be clear, or just to clear up a common misconception, not all threats come from some highly skilled hacker sitting behind a computer and likes to, has a hoodie or is a part of anonymous hacking group or state-sponsored hacking group. Some of them are known as script kiddies, which they just look things up on how to do it, right? A lot of time access happens because of very simple things like an unlocked phone, outdated device, shared login credentials, or someone just using AI and YouTube. Uh, but so, just stick with these three things, right? When the window pops up to say, hey, you need to restart your computer because you have updates that need to do, don't delay that for a week because it's supposed to happen every week, actually. And there's actually a thing in Microsoft called Patch Tuesday. It just every Tuesday, new patches come out because there's always something else that's getting exploited or taken advantage of that they're having to fix. Let's see here. So, and also keep in mind, teens lose phones, right? And they love to share their devices with their friends or leave them unlocked constantly. I mean, so building these habits early is going to help them a lot more in the long run, and might even help you as well. Because think about this: that they have their phone and their habits. They're coming into your house. They're going to be that your network is only as strong as the weakest link, right? So if they have stuff on their phone that's bad, coming into your house, that's not good, right? Now, one thing I wanted to get a little focus in here, signs your email has been hacked, right? So let's talk about a little practicality here. How would you even know if something's wrong? Because a lot of times accounts don't get locked out right away. They get quietly accessed. Most of the time, you're not looking for one big obvious sign, though. You're looking for things that just don't feel right, right? So let's go through suspicious activity. First, suspicious activity, things like login alerts from places you've never been, password reset emails you didn't request. That's often one thing, one of the first indicators something's off, right? Then we have messages you didn't send. So this is usually how people first find out. Someone tells you, "Hey, did you mean to send me this?" And you're like, "Whoa, I did not mean to ask you for $10,000. What?" You know? Or you see emails in your sent folder and you're like, "Oh, I did not send that. Why is this happening?" Right? Um, and then third, settings that have changed. Uh, so this is a big one that people often miss, though. Things like your recovery email being changed or rules set up automatically forwarding your emails without you even knowing. Uh, Email platforms have gotten a little bit better about making sure you verify with two-factor authentication when you add that, but still something to be looking out for. So again, this isn't always obvious, right? Um, but it's usually quite, small things that don't quite add up. So if your account starts behaving differently than you expect, assume it could be compromised and take action, change that password, right? So, all right, go on to the next one. So, if you do see those warning signs, the good news is there's a clear path to getting things back under control. And most important thing here is to not panic. Just take it step by step. So, this isn't about doing everything perfectly. It's about doing the right things in the right order. So, change your password immediately. Turn on multi-factor authentication if it's not already turned on. And then, here, hold on one second. Let's scroll down. You want to take control of the account, review recovery email. So basically everything that I just talked about, right? Like you just want to make sure that all of that is in order, change it back to the way it is. One big thing that is normally an option in most platforms is logging out of all devices and sessions, right? So if you can log out of all your devices and sessions, push them out, and then change that password, that would be that'll normally help you out a lot. And change that password to something you haven't used before. I think it is a very key thing there. But my voice is getting dry. I swear I don't talk this much normally. Okay, and then so yeah, make sure you're monitoring activity later on, right? So looking at different accounts. Also, right? If if you had if you had been reusing passwords for the same accounts and one got taken advantage of, uh-oh. Now you do need to go look at all these other accounts, right? Because they're using the same password. And if it's if it's your same email and everything, then that's going to be a lot more work. So if you do, ounce of prevention worth a pound of cure thing with the password manager and you have unique passwords, it'll help mitigate you having to do that kind of work if you experience, one account getting compromised. Now, app and privacy hygiene. So, last piece of digital hygiene is what I call app and privacy hygiene. I kind of like this, and I like the logo. I put it on every slide after I introduced it. I don't know. I got really excited about it. Anyway, so this is really about controlling what information is shared and who has access to it. So if I could simplify this whole slide, right, it would be, the less you share and the more control you have over settings, and the safer you are. So control visibility, right? Who can see and interact with your child online? Things like who can message them, tag them, see their posts. There's often, now platforms now usually have some kind of mode where you can view, what it's like as someone who's not your friend or is your friend and what they can see in the settings. And then second, you want to secure the email account like it's your master key, right? So that's the one that needs, your password manager is your master key, right? So, but your email that you sign up with the password manager is also a master key. So you definitely want to make sure that that's protected as well. You also want to make sure that you're downloading apps from trusted sources, usually, the Play Store, the App Store from Apple, etc. There are believe it or not, there's other stores that people sometimes go to And that's some of the, that's what you need to be on the lookout for. So normally, if you just stick with the Play Store, the App Store from Apple, you're going to be fine on that. And also limiting the permissions for each app, right? So now generally phones allow you to go into what permissions each app has, and if you can limit the location permission, I would do that. I highly encourage that, especially the microphone permission as well. I mean, sometimes it's functionality, right? I mean, that's the biggest thing here in this day and age, right? It's not just like this is all bad, right? Like the app having permission for my microphone or geolocation is all bad, right? No, no, we're weighing convenience, security, and privacy, right? So like the more convenience you have, sometimes that's you need it to be able to be productive or to do something that you're setting out to do. But sometimes you're going to be sacrificing some security and privacy at the risk of that. I mean, nobody is going to read every single privacy agreement that they have to sign. But if you want to use that platform, you're going to have to agree to it, right? So just make sure that you're keeping all of that in the back of your head and just know, hey, am I willing to sacrifice privacy here so that I can use Google Maps, right? So just keeping that in the back of your head. So, but overall, when you're reviewing your privacy in the apps, it's about limiting that exposure as best you can. Now, another favorite part of mine, digital citizenship and some tips for teens. So everything we've talked about so far has been about safety, protection. This last piece is about something a little bit bigger than that and kind of more, kind of like what you really want to help push your teen into, right? So who are kids become in the digital world, becoming a digital citizen. So because at the end of the day, we can't control every situation they're going to be in, but we can help shape how they respond. So one of the biggest things is pause before posting. A simple question, right? Would you say this face to face? That tends to, at least put the seed or thought in their head, right? I mean, and there's plenty of people out there that have, you're like, wow, this person does not act like that when I talk to them, but over text message, they're like, you know, miles a minute and saying things that you're like, they wouldn't say that to my face. You know what I mean? So I think trying to talk to your teens about this early is really important. Consent, going back to what I was saying about doxing, right? So don't share other people's private content, right? Especially if they've entrusted this with you, etc., or specifically asked you to not. Okay. And if you had made a mistake, right? If you did share something that that your teen was like, no, I thought it was okay, right? Like, but the person got upset and wasn't okay with it. Instead of getting mad at them, like teach them how to make it right, and teach them how to apologize and be like, listen, I didn't mean for this to happen. I think it's really hard, right? Because teens tend to have it's easy for teens' egos to go unchecked. And I think teaching them to be able to eat a little bit of that humble pie early is a lot easy, will go a long way, right? It'll help them acquire that taste early. So having those uncomfortable conversations about how to go have those uncomfortable conversations is a really useful thing to do, especially when, you're raising teens, because Lord knows their peers can sometimes really take them down the wrong path. Courage, stand up for peers who are getting bullied, even if it's not like, intervening, right? Go grab an adult, right? I'm so tired of oh, this is a snitch and blah, 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 blah. You're not cool. Like, no, you're not being cool for bullying somebody. You're not being cool for dogpiling somebody and teaching your kid that, like, no, no, you're doing the right thing, not just because of that's what the parents and the teachers are saying. You're doing the right thing because like what if you were that kid, right? And you know that that's wrong. So I think teaching them that can go a long way as well, especially towards digital citizenship. Now, okay, so kind of shifting here, just kind of more into the tips, right? So obviously, all too easy to block harmful users if they're just getting bombarded with messages. I also think that that's harder for teens, right? Is to there's a lot of intrigue in the sense of oh, is somebody going to accept me, or I get this message from somebody, so or a friend request, and I think trying to you know make sure that they're only adding people that they know, right? So now reporting and then reporting abuse on platform, right? This good. I've mentioned this throughout the presentation. Every platform's got something. Quick Google search or your favorite search engine can help you find that. And then balancing online and offline life. I think that's something to also encourage as well. Now, practical tips for parents, right? So to bring all of this together, kind of want to leave you with some practical things you can actually do at home. Uh, and the goal here isn't to do all of these perfectly. Just pick a few uh, that fit your family and start there. So first, your environment matters. Things like keeping devices in common spaces uh, and not having everything happen behind closed doors. That in and of itself naturally reduces risk. Stay involved, uh, but not intrusive, right? So reviewing privacy settings, uh, following or friending your child on platforms, learning about the apps together. This isn't about, obviously, it's not about spying, it's about staying connected with them, etc. Third, keep an open line of communication, like I've been saying throughout the presentation. This probably isn't the most important, or this is probably the most important one. If your child feels like they can come to you without immediately getting in trouble, you're going to be in a much better position to help them, right? And then, see here, there you go. Also, model what you want to see, right? As I said before, kids tend to follow our example rather than what we tell them to do. And finally, so use tools like parental controls when they make sense and as whatever platforms you're allowing your child to be on. Things like screen time limits or app restrictions, those can be very helpful. But they work best when they're paired with conversation and talking with your teens. So again, this isn't about controlling everything your child does. It's about creating an environment, building habits, and staying connected. Small, consistent actions at home can make a big difference over time. Now, parental controls. So let's talk about parental controls because this is something a lot of parents have questions about. Parental controls can be really helpful, but like I said, they work best when they're used to support your parenting and not replacing it. Uh, Boundaries, right? First, uh, the parental controls themselves, they help you set those boundaries. Things like screen time limits, app limits, or downtime. You can even set limits on specific apps, not just the whole device, right? So you could say, I don't want them to download Tinder, right? Or some other dating or any dating app, right? Like, but you can do that. You can individually block apps. And just so you know, in the supplemental guide, there will be some links to all these different parental controls that you can use in platforms, etc. Now, we also got so parental controls can also help filter content, helping make sure what your child is seeing is age appropriate. Now, monitoring, this doesn't mean reading every message, but it's more about, understanding the patterns, what apps they're using, how much time they're spending, etc., which the parental controls can usually give you a time of what they're spending on each specific app. By the way, if you didn't know this, I just found this out recently. Spotify enables you to see different podcasts and stuff that can be very similar to YouTube videos. So if you're like, oh, I'm just letting them listen to music, just make sure you're also looking at, you know, what they're listening to or watching on Spotify and other music apps as well. Now, go to the next one. So manage purchases and downloads. Those can normally help. You can normally, they normally give you a way so where you can give like your teen a wallet, right? And you can just give them money, or you can set it to where like, hey, you have this money, you can go purchase if you trust them, right? Or if you need a little bit more guidance in there, you can say, oh, no, I'm going to give them money, but I want them to request I want to have to approve each transaction, right? You can normally do that. So, but the most important part here, right? Controls should support conversations and trust, not replace them. All right. Now, so to close this out, I want to zoom out a bit because everything we've talked about, safety, habits, boundaries, it all works best when it's part of your family culture. Uh, this isn't about one rule or one setting. It's about creating a rhythm at home that supports healthy habits over time. So, one of the most powerful things you could do is create intentional tech-free time, right? So things like meals, game nights, or time together where devices aren't the focus. That helps reset attention and connection. Also scheduled breaks from screens, even outside of those times, right? Giving the brain time to rest and reset is really important. Talking about emotions, right? So, and having open conversations about how, online experiences feel, not just what they're doing, but how it's affecting them. That builds awareness over time, right? So asking those questions. And encouraging offline activities, sports, hobbies, time with friends, because if we only take something away without replacing it, it's much harder to sustain change. And using things like the do not disturb to reduce constant interruptions. Personally, I just would say, hey, if you're doing homework, just put your phone somewhere else, right? But also, I think, if that's not your preference, uh, do not disturb feature is also very helpful. And then keeping devices out of the bedrooms at night. This is for me, this is huge. And I say this from personal experience. I did not have this out of the bedroom at night, and it deeply affected my habits. So this is something that I learned as a child, and took into adulthood, is making sure that your children don't have devices in the bedroom because it's way, way, way too tempting. So again, this isn't about being perfect. It's about building simple, consistent habits as a family. Because over time, those habits shape how your kids interact with technology for the rest of their lives. So, all right. So as we wrap up, I want to bring this back to something simple. You don't have to be a tech expert to do this well. You just need a plan and a willingness to stay engaged and learn. Um, I mean, first you want to stay connected, keep that line of communication open, and try to stay non-judgmental, because if your child feels safe coming to you, you're already in a very strong position. Second, build habits, small, consistent routines like device boundaries, screen-free time, and what create long-term safety. And third, we're not just trying to protect our kids, we're helping them learn how to make good decisions on their own. And finally, act early. If something feels off, trust your instincts and step in. It's always easier to address things early than later. But yeah, the goal, again, go back. The goal isn't perfection. That's raising teens who can navigate the digital world safely and responsibly. So, been rambling on a lot here, but I really appreciate all of you coming here and listening to me ramble about this. I was really looking forward to this, so I just want to tell all of you that I really appreciate you joining and listening to me talk about this.